So you asked, I mean, we'll just take a quick round robin then. I would like to lead with the hot topic of the moment that everyone's talking about with the AI one, but that's my vote. I'm going in any direction you guys want to go.
That's up to John and Jack. If you guys are comfortable with that, let's start this informal chat about AI and KM.
Sounds good. What's your thinking? What's your thinking, Rooven?
Okay, great. So I'm just going to spitball and interrupt and whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter, right? So here's what I'm feeling, guys. I did the other day, just Googled AI and KM. And I think there's a mini Cambrian explosion going on here, okay? It just blew up, right? There was so many providers talk from Forbes through to consultancies, through to independent thinkers, through to philosophers, through to tech companies trying to make a sale with some kind of platform that can, and it reminded me of, I think all of us over a certain age, we can rewind the clock back to either the, say, 2000s when Google went mainstream, when the internet went mainstream, and all the hype and expectation around that. And also it reminded me of the mobile phone revolution as well, when they talked about internet being on your phone, it would do all these amazing things. And of course, in the early days, it didn't. But if you look at your mobile phone today, it totally does, right? And what's happened is it's ended up exceeding what the imagination could think of. So you've got lots of people, ourselves included. I've seen some stuff when you Google AI and KM, a KMI comes up as well. There's a lady talking, does an article about where she thinks it's going and so on. You've got lots of people trying to imagine where the relationship with AI and KM is going to go. And I think it might be helpful to the audience for us to throw our tuppence in as well. And then, of course, time will tell us what actually happens. Okay, so that's kind of the context I'm putting out there. So maybe I'll throw a first one, ask you guys a couple of things, and that'll maybe kick off a conversation. So a lot of people are uncertain about the role of knowledge managers with the coming of AI. What are your guys' thoughts on that one? What's going to happen to will the old knowledge manager still be in play, or will that shift? John, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, or Jack, you got one?
Yeah. Well, I want to provide a little my point of view of a couple things relative to AI. And sure. When you touched on it, going back to honestly to the late 90s, or maybe the mid 90s, when the first Apple Macintosh hit the street and home computing became a reality for just about everybody. I remember attending my very first KM conference, and a person from an unnamed consultancy stood up and said, "This is the future of KM," and held up his Nokia flip phone.
Wow.
And said, "This is what KM is all about," because now remember, this is when, I don't remember the exact term for it, when you had to push the number 1 3 times to go through A, B, and C. That was the genesis of texting. And he spent an entire hour talking about that. And now look at where we are today. So yes. I think it's not just about AI. I think we have to talk about how we, and I'll limit it to knowledge managers, but the folks we either consult with or work for, how we embrace new and emerging technologies. There's always a push, especially among early adapters, to take the shiny new brass ring and run with it. My experience is that the technology most companies have for where they are relative to KM maturation is good enough. They haven't fully leveraged all of that technology yet. They're still trying to get their arms around it. And as a result, when they introduce something new, there's learning curves that get involved, early adapters versus the people who are the doubters and who are going to drag their heels on it, as opposed to really analyzing, truly do a knowledge audit, a real live audit, and see where we are, what our needs are, and are the needs of our internal customers first and foremost being met. Because if we're not meeting the needs of our users, our customers can't be very happy. They're not going to get an ultimate product. And then the customers. relative to AI, one of the things that I pitch in my class is I keep AI at a little bit of arm's length. And here's why. For me, it's only as good as the people programming it. And if they come in with unintentional biases, if they don't understand the topic they're really looking at and they misprogram something, then the average user isn't going to know. The AI tool is going to go out there and, search and scrape along the interweb and come back with something that might not be 100% accurate. And here within KMI, we've experienced some of that because we've done pushback on each other as course developers and saying, hey, look at this. And then somebody will come back and say, nah, I'm not quite sure that that's completely accurate. So I think AI is still in its infancy. I think the role of the KM manager, going back to your specific point, is where are we in our maturity as a KM organization? What do we need? And then look at the results coming out of AI and actually vet it, actually go through and research it rather than just taking it at face value. I've done the same thing as you, Reuven. I've done lots of chat GPTs. And some of the information I get back is brilliant. I wouldn't have thought of it. And I'm glad I did it. Others of it, I look at it and I go, what exactly is this that's coming back here? And then the more I dive into it, the better the results become. But again, and this is the danger, I'm allowing those results to be colored by my own biases, my learnings, my way of thinking, my experiences. And if they don't align, quite honestly, I kind of tend to discount it a little more than I would if it was a brand new topic that I'd never explored before.
Very good. John, your thought?
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree, which is going to make this much less interesting. I've been listening and thinking at the same time, mostly listening. Three things have been popping up. The printing press as ancient history, SECI as a very theoretical academic thing, and then I liked your question about the knowledge manager. So let me see if I can do all three relatively quick. David Gertine will often talk about, we say that knowledge management sort of began in 1995, 96-ish, somewhere in there. And David will always say, no, it at least started when the printing press was created, because can you imagine there was no way to mass produce a single message and get that out to the world, right? But so now fast forward that hundreds of years into SCCI, socialization, externalization, combination, internalization. I'm with you, Jack, where I sort of keep it at arm's length a little bit, because to me, even though I know AI is huge and it's bigger than ChatGPT and it's all, creating audio, video, and all kinds of other types of AI, I still tend to over-bucket it, over-categorize it into only combination. It is only explicit, and you're completely missing socialization, externalization, and internalization. Now, that's not all the way true. If I'm reading the ChatGPT as one example, then I'm probably internalizing some of it. And right now, 3, 4, 5 of us are chatting about it. So yes, there is some socialization, but again, just ChatGPT is one example. It is only one small bucket of KM, and that takes me over into the knowledge manager. I think you both will agree, but tell me if you don't, that unfortunately, if you go out and Google knowledge manager, you don't get knowledge manager roles, you get information manager roles, right? You get SharePoint developer, SharePoint designer, ChatGPT designer, and it's titled as knowledge manager. And I don't know, part of me, I keep going back and forth with this over the decades of on one hand, that's really frustrating, where there's zero tacit, there's no socialization, externalization, internalization in that job title, in those capabilities, and that's frustrating. On the other hand, I think there's hundreds, if not thousands of roles out there, which means there's budget, which means there's interest. And if they want to use the front door as information management, so that maybe with the title of knowledge manager, maybe they can actually do some tacit knowledge flow in this information manager role titled as a knowledge manager role?
Well, John, those are some great points, and I completely agree with you. And you triggered something talking about that. I think part of my hesitancy to just embrace in the gross and overall the whole AI concept, Chat GPT, is very often I can't track down the prime resources. I can't look at it and read these things on my own because in large part, I never know where they're coming from. And so I don't think most knowledge managers do it. And I think part of the problem we face as a KM industry writ large is the fact that there are too many professors of KM out there talking about the theoretical, and there aren't enough actual practitioners leading the charge and selling this and getting people to understand the true role of a knowledge manager. And so a lot of the people I encounter love to talk about the theoretical, but they can't address the practical. And so the organizations don't understand the true value of KM to their organizations. They just hear this theory. And then to your point, it all comes back to, well, what do I need you for? I can just have a really great SharePoint library and people can just search it and get the explicit information that they need without worrying about all the tacit to tacit knowledge exchange that goes on.
Okay, so I'm going to be the elephant in the room or the odd one out and go from a different angle. And I think I could pick up on Jack's point from the practicality side. So I've been lucky enough to be working with a client, a big global consultancy, and they've invested, as have many of them, they've invested in AI. So I think the first distinction to draw is, as John said, ChatGPT is the public AI. Okay, companies are investing billions in private AI. That means they're buying the tech, and as you say, Jack, they're developing it. So it's now exploring their own content, not out in the internet. So the sources question gets reduced to a certain degree because it's our sources, it's the company sources, it's the company basis, and it's multimedia. So it's reports, it's files, it's videos, etc. And what they're using it for is to scale, to get the productivity step change. There's only so many videos you can watch, Jack, in a given day, or only so many reports I can read. But if I can ask my AI assistant to find out in the company everything about this particular topic, and I can guide it as to, I've got a presentation coming up with another department, with an external client, build me a presentation based on the best internal content. That's what it can do. Now, it's not without its flaws. What the client's telling me and sharing with me is they've set up a KM team to audit, the good word that you use, Jack, but not to do the hard digging because that doesn't scale. So they use the AI to write the presentation or the report, and then they use the KM team to vet that before making those AI findings available to the rest of the organization. So what they're doing is they're not making AI available company-wide. They're controlling it from distinct groups with their knowledge managers in place. Does that address some of the points that you're concerned about?
Well, I think at a basic level, Reuven, yes, it does. But when I look at, now, and again, this is just my point of view, when I look at how AI is being used across the KM community, I look at KM for Development and several other similar types of organizations. They tend to be focused on very high level global issues, solving climate change. And there are so many differing opinions, and who's vetting all of that and saying this is best in class. What I don't think we have enough of yet experientially is exactly what you're talking about, Reuven. I don't know of very many true CKOs or directors of KM or KM managers, whatever the title is for that organization, weighing in on the discussion of how we use KM to leverage our knowledge assets within our organization to make us more competitive, more profitable, whatever it is that they're doing. Most KM, like I'm following closely, I'm sure you all too, there's a whole big issue going on in Africa about the effects of colonization and how they're going to change the world with KM. Those are thought-provoking, interesting topics. But I'm just speaking from my point of view. I'm relatively certain that topic is not going to resonate with any private for-profit companies. I just don't see that working. And so I'm missing all of the case studies on AI within an organization and how they're leveraging it to really laser focus leveraging KM to make them a better, more productive, more competitive company.
I do always love, Rooven, how you like your passion for tech. It reminds me of like how like I've always tried to balance the people, process, technology aspects of knowledge management. And I must admit, the last 15, 20 years, I've more and more leaned away from the tech and more towards the process and the people. So I love that you bring me back. Deep digging is the words you use that really resonate with me. And here would be my gentle challenge, because I know we can do this.
Yes.
If Dave Snowden is correct with we know more than we say and we say more than we write, and knowing that generative AI can write new stuff for us, isn't the deep digging in the knowledge, not in the writings?
Yes.
You're at the bottom of the filter.
Correct.
So aren't we still missing
yes.
all of the true tacit knowledge? So how do we balance that?
Such a good question. So let me accept that question. So what I was talking about was level one, and you're quite right. At level one, they're just going for the explicit knowledge. So it's only, as Snowden's principle, if you follow it, the smallest amount is what's written down or codified. There's a huge amount that's tacit, the old 80-20 tacit explicit. But that's level one of AI. Now, that's happening now. Now, I'm going to go into future speak now and say, imagine, okay, but it isn't such a big leap, right? So imagine a world in which you've got a company. Let's take a company with a group of sales reps, make it really simple, okay? Each one of those sales reps is visiting a client or a group of consultants, whatever. They're visiting clients. They have client meetings. But now, after the client meeting, they've learned a lot of things at the client meeting. That Snowden's principle, they've got a lot of knowledge. How do they share that back to the company? As soon as they start saying stuff, it's less. As soon as they start writing stuff, it's even less. And usually there's a kind of post-client report they got to fill out and send in and so on. But imagine a world in which, when you finished your client meeting, there you are, John, you've just come out of the client meeting, and you have your own avatar. Okay, your avatar, we'll call her Millie. Okay, so Millie says, how was the meeting, John? And you go, oh, is the meeting over, John? Yeah, it's over. How was it on a scale of 1 to 10? What are the key? And so now it's having a conversation with you, but it's using adaptive learning, which is already happening in education. As a child answers question A, it says, they're competent, I'll give them a harder question, and so on. So it starts to now do the socialization piece with you. It's getting that tacit knowledge out, but it's easy because you're driving, right? You're relaxed. It's asking, you may say, I don't want to answer that one. And then you ask it stuff. Okay, so it says to you, oh, it's interesting that you said that, John, that the client was talking about this theme. This theme has appeared within 6 other client calls today. You go, really? Who? They go, oh, Jennifer Saunders did it at blah, blah, blah customer. Oh, would you like me to set up a meeting with Jennifer Saunders for you? I can see her diary. Boom, boom, boom. And so the social, it's starting to intercept in the tacit space now. You're getting it, of course, because you've got a tech background, so you can see it. And I guess what's making me excited or worried or whatever, or tuned into the reality of it is I'm a huge YouTube person. I use it for all aspects of my, personal development, and I'm into quantum mechanics and all that stuff. And increasingly, I'd be watching videos and realizing it's not a human that's made the video because it'll mispronounce the English language, right? And so you'll know, and then you'll see in the comments, everybody said, it's AI, but not. But then I think I used to recoil, but now I'm thinking, but the content is good, right? I was interested in that discussion on whatever, spirituality or whatever, even though an AI created it. Obviously, it's gone, following Jack's point, and looked at all the content out there and created a storyline around your search item. So it's matching your desire for something. I'm interested in company XYZ. And in our company, here are the people who are interacting with company XYZ. So I think that's the phase that will attack the kind of Snowden world is coming. I think it would be foolish to pretend it doesn't, because we can benchmark that against mobile phones today. You know, if I take the mobile phone away from anybody here today, I can literally count the minutes till you become agitated and dysfunctional, right? It's your life support system now, right? Whether we like it or not. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it is what it is. And it's interesting because you mentioned the printing press. And I love that example because there's another great thinker out there, Marshall McLuhan, who talks about the print, you know, the medium is the message. He says the printing press is really interesting, not just because it took knowledge and made it widely available, but his interesting observation was the human behavior shifted. Before the printing press, people used to gather in villages, and there would be one person who could read and write, and they would sit under the tree, and that person would tell the story. So the scribe, right? And the others were illiterate. They couldn't read. So they were using their ear as their primary organ for knowledge transfer. It was auditory. Once the printing press occurred, they didn't use their ears at all. They used their eyes. Right? The medium shifted the body and the way in which it accepted knowledge. And that's what happens when you look at technology systems. You look at the mobile, as I say, we use it in very different ways today than what we could have ever have imagined when it first came out. And so my interesting thing I wanted to throw out is, you know, where is AI going to be going? And I think my instinct is it's going to find a way to get into the Secchi model and attack the socialization piece. It's not going to be perfect, but think about a leader who's got all their clients being interrogated by their individual avatars and then collating that back in near real time. I can figure out trends. And in today's world, as we know, companies are under, you know, mass extinction threat, right? 40% of CEOs recently said that if they don't reinvent their companies in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 year frames, they won't be able to survive because the business models are changing so fast, so that they will invest in this as not out of altruism, not out of love of their employees, but out of a need to survive. I need to know the best knowledge. I need the best intel as fast as possible to gather from the field, because I agree, lots of good stuff must be being lost from sales guys just going, you know, it was a great meeting, but I'm exhausted. I just want to find the next, you know, burger joint and park up and, you know, but now with the avatar just chatting to them, right? Even though they could say, oh, it's now not a good time. And they go, no, now's not a good time. But in a couple of hours, I'll be at home and I don't mind doing it then because I know to do it in the morning or whatever. Am I making sense?
Definitely. For me, what's coming up there is if we can fundamentally rethink, you know, knowledge management is, again, only 20 or 30 years old, maybe, in the way I guess we currently look at it. And SECI is a major model. We know that implicit knowledge is missing from SECI.
Yes,
right? It's got tacit and explicit, but not implicit. And that's Jack's point too, of like, what about confirmation bias? What about inadvertent bias? What about all the human stuff that comes into the way AI is currently coded and algorithms and the practice of it, which we know is expanding and getting better and better and broader and broader. Yeah, I love that you bring in we could do that, but what if we could fundamentally shift some of the foundational practices and theories of KM now? For sure, you're onto something. Let's do it.
Exactly. I think there's a new KM role coming up. You know, the KM avatar manager, right? Who's thinking like you are, that, hey, we need to have it asking the right questions, right? Let's get the best stuff out of it, right? So we are going to direct it to make sure when you're talking to a salesperson, ask these kind of questions. And here's a set of adaptive responses.
Rooven, I want to go back to something you talked about, you and John, which I think is bordering on a brilliant conversation, and there actually may be a thesis in here somewhere. The advent of the printing press, and you finally have a way to get the word out to the masses. But I want to dwell on that just for a second. You have somebody who's putting the type, is doing all the typesetting, and you're printing something. Now bear with me while I paint this with a very broad brush. So you have a single person's opinion of something that is now printed, is now, if you will, gospel, and it goes out, and it is that single version that's taught, where people are, to the example, one person who can read sitting at the base of the tree, and all the village's children gather round, and they listen to the story that's being read to them. Now, I would argue that this really is little different, except it's printed. This is little different than the example we use in class, where you have the cavemen sitting around passing on the tribal knowledge to their children to teach them how to bring down that mastodon with one arrow. So now you have, but in this setting that you guys so eloquently, I truly love you, eloquently described here, where a reader is sitting at the base of a tree talking to the village people, you are now establishing, you're embedding tribal knowledge. This is how something is done, and the person who's reading this to us is smarter than the rest of us because they know how to read.
Correct.
Therefore, this must be accurate.
Correct.
Now, with the advent of the internet, I'm going to leap forward many years.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a whole bunch of people sitting around their trees, spreading their word out to everybody. And what's now missing is the singularity of one person sitting at the tree with the village sitting around them, and the interaction, the town square, if you will, where people are talking and sharing, saying, okay, well, Reuben, I heard you said this, but my experience is it took 2 arrows to bring down the mastodon. And you have that give and take. To John's point, the socialization, the tacit knowledge exchange. And as you're talking, and I want to dwell just a little bit on implicit. Implicit goes back to, my military days, where somebody says, you're here, the objective is over there, go take the objective. And I look at the map and I implicitly know that blue thing across the middle of the map is a river, and I've got to figure out a way to cross it. Yep. So there are implied tasks in there. So I think we're starting to see the fabric of knowledge management have little rips and tears in it, because we no longer have this group of people sitting around talking. And I think this gets to the heart of my, I'm not going to say reluctance, my wariness around AI, is that we have an unknown person sitting at the Gutenberg press knocking this stuff out. I don't know who this person is. I can't talk to this person because this is an amalgamation of hundreds, if not thousands, of things written that are now coming together, and millions of people are looking at it, each coming away with their own nuanced interpretation of what that means based on their experiences, their upbringing, how their tribe brought them up. And as a result, it's very hard to find any coherence within a group of people any longer. And I hate to bring this up, but just look around today. I could say one thing, and all the disparate groups we have in America today, you suddenly have all this arguing back and forth with really very little dialogue happening because everybody's shouting, yep, trying to be heard. And so I think AI, while I understand it and I think it can add value, I think it is fraught with potential risks from a learning standpoint, unless it is within, Reuben, your example, an organization highly centrally controlled to make sure that the nuances are appropriate for that organization, as opposed to what I can get just by going out and looking at AIT, or we taught, querying Chat GPT and see what kind of fluff comes back to me.
Great point.
Two that I use.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. I was going to just throw
sure.
Copilot and Chat GPT and with with Dolly, so like the latest version, I guess. So creating images too are the ones that I use every day, in and out of every day. And the 2 points I want to make are time, attention, priority that we talk about in class, as well as relationships. So really quick, time, attention, priority. So for tens of thousands of years, if we're looking at like chronological, shared reality, right? Land, labor, and capital have been the biggest constraints. And now part of what you're saying, Reuven, is that actually all three of those are now abundant. There's virtual land, there's virtual labor, that's definitely what you're talking about, and there's virtual capital, right? Just credit everywhere, right? So those three things are no longer constraints. So Jack, you're talking about, and both of us, all of us are talking about like scratching at the foundations of KM. I think from the human perspective, the true constraints today, if it's a chronological shared reality, because we haven't figured out how to like bend time yet. Maybe some of us have. I don't know. I haven't. Why are we on this call right now? Why is anybody listening to this call? Why are you spending the time, the attention, the priority in this moment, this shared reality moment right now doing that? Because the relationship side, the other point I wanted to make is, okay, so great. I'm actually all for all the generative AI, let's call it for now. Great. All for it. Want to partner with it. I think my question is, what's my relationship to it? What's its relationship to me? How am I partnering with it? How is it partnering with me? And you can imagine where I'm really taking that is, so then what is the unique value of the human side? What is it that I offer that is there? You talked about moving from like the ear to the eye. Great. Can I now move to like a soulful existence? I don't know, some other way of getting tacit knowledge to flow in relationship with the stuff that's all automated and automatically created. That could scratch at the foundations of what we do.
Yes,
inside organizations.
Great point. Let me just pick up on a few things there. So it's interesting what Jack said about the printing press has the bias of the man who's setting the typeface. And no surprise, it was the Bible that was the first thing that rolled off the printing press, which many could argue is a certain bias, right? But nevertheless. And then guess what? Everybody read the Bible. So then they all became the tribal story, and probably religion was able to explode in that way, right? So the technology may have hurt knowledge management, not increased it at printing press point, depending on how you look at it. But going on to John's point, and now you might argue today as well, there's a multiplicity of views, which creates a new set of problems, as Jack has illustrated. And who could have foreseen social media when the internet first came around? Google didn't tell us that social media would happen, and the human implications of social media and the multiple viewpoints. Coming to John's point, that's why I'm excited about the discussion about, and it's called, what is the relationship between AI and KM? I think that AI has an area that it can't do, that we can do. And that's where the shift, I think, is going to happen. Yet it can do the things better in certain areas that we can read more than we can. So it's silly for us to try and compete in that area, but it can't. And we go back to the tree again, Jack. It can't tell stories in a way that's convincing, right? That's human, right? That has the implicit, the experiential side of it, the soulful side of it, the fact that we're mortal creatures side of it, right? The machine just keeps going, right? But the rest of us pass through this life in a different way. Jack started off by telling us the wonderful story of the moving story of the guy visiting the beach and where his comrades had fallen and joining them in a sense. That's the image I got in my mind. He was joining them. The machine is oblivious to all of that. It's not sentient. It doesn't feel. It doesn't think. It doesn't say, when it's talking to you, I'm sorry that the meeting didn't go well, and here's some comfort for you. It doesn't do that bit. And so I think that's what I'm exploring with you guys. I don't know the answers. Feels like the role of the knowledge manager is going to want to go to our strong suit, which is the human side, the people side. And because the machine's going to take care of the stuff that we used to focus on with old KM. I guess that's where I'm going with that. I don't know how that's going to play out, as John said, but it feels if we just left it to AI, yes, it would get all the things done in a functional sense, but you'd have a dysfunctional organization because we don't feel like we belong to anything. Right?
Well, the thing that concerns me, really one of my overarching concerns about AI is that I'm very concerned that KM, as a result, will get lazy. That we're going to take at face value the returns we're getting, and I think it's driving us away. Going to John's use of the SCCI model, which is my favorite model. John's use of the SCCI model, I think AI is my point of view. I think it's driving people away from the socialization aspect. I think people they're so enamored with AI and the results because there's a lot. You can get a lot of stuff and you start reading it. And I don't know that anybody, in particular knowledge managers, are looking at that and then using that to drive conversations. And from my standpoint, the real learning comes from these kinds of dialogues. We can bounce ideas off of each other. We can hear different opinions. I hear different experiences. And then using that, I bring that back into my mind and I contextualize it. I put a framework around it within the basis of my experiences, my current position. And I say, okay, Reuven said this, that doesn't work for me, but I understand what he's saying. And this is something I need to be aware of. And unless we're going to leverage AI to drive the socialization and to drive those discussions around experiences and to drive, like Reuven, you and I both love to champion CLPs. I mean, at least in my mind, what is the single best purpose of a CLP? To drive the interaction among the practitioners so they can leverage each other and learn, become better, faster, smarter. I'm concerned that AI is going to discourage those kind of interactions.
No, it's a genuine concern and a good concern. My take on COPs is AI will be a member of the community, right? Yep. Because it will create content for the community directed by the community, right? So why should we? So yeah, lazy, or hopefully substitute lazy for more productive. We can focus on the good stuff because we have a new servant called AI, right? But we are the master. It's the servant. That's, I think, where the fear is.
And that's actually how we run knowledge cafes now. Is it was an experiment, I don't know, 6 or 12 months ago, to like have AI input during a knowledge cafe, and now it's a standard. Now it's every cafe. While the provocateur, the person that's offering some content at the beginning, will always have AI present to say, "Here's what I'm saying," and it's listening to it, and then it's offering real-time feedback as if it's heading towards conversational skill. And I love when we talk about conversation and dialogue. So that's actually a lot of the work several of us are now looking into, is like, oh, wait, KM partners really well with other disciplines like organization development, like change management, like monitoring, evaluation, and learning, library sciences. So there's this whole new emerging field of conversational leadership, maybe is what one label will be, because surprisingly, shockingly to me anyway, yes, we've had communications and other ways of looking at the way we interact with each other. Apparently, there has not been as much research and study and practice and improvement in the areas of actual conversation and dialogue. There's this one person out there, Theodore Zeldin, who has this quote: "The only conversations I want to be a part of are the ones where everyone involved is willing to emerge as a different person." And that's like, oh, wait. So if we're on a panel and we're having like serial monologues and talking past each other, are we really in conversation? Or we might say, that's a certain quality of conversation. There's a different quality. And I'm actually keeping AI and humans together. Like, yeah, I don't think AI is quite there yet to be at that conversational skill. Frankly, there are a lot of humans, myself included, not quite at that skill of conversation. Won't that be amazing when both humans and AI can have some sort of, I guess, quality, for lack of a better word at the moment, some skill in relating and interacting. Reuven, you gave the example of like, hey, sorry that meeting didn't go well. Okay, so that's like somewhere between empathy and compassion, or at least sympathy, right? Like, I think that's a whole range of skill that maybe all of us could practice. I know for me anyway.
Yeah, but are you saying you think that AI can become sentient? It can feel? Are you going that?
Not in 2024, but will you be shocked if by 2040, 2050 it can? I don't think we can be shocked anymore by that.
Wow. Okay. Well, then this has been you've taken me to that high bar that I don't know who you mentioned, Theodore Zeldin or whatever, said that you acknowledging that has been transformational for me because.
All right. Then there you
go.
Right. Well, I'd like to cover two things. One that Reuven talked about and one that John talked about. When I'm dealing with my clients and they are using AI, I encourage them to use AI in two ways. One, to use it within the context of communities of practice as a research tool.
Exactly.
To bring information into the community where then the community of practice can review it. They can curate that information, decide what's valid, current, and contextually correct for that community of practitioners and by extension for the organization they're in. And then secondly, and John, I wasn't going to speak to this, but you hit the nail right on the head. When we have team meetings, we have tiger teams, we have problem solving sessions, I encourage them to bring AI into the conversation as another person sitting in the room that can contribute to the discussion with the group. I'm going back to my person under the tree and the town sitting around it. You have a facilitator in the room, and AI is one more person sitting at the foot of the tree, listening to the conversation and contributing. That way, the people in that room, as they're talking, AI contributes to the discussion. It contributes to the conversation, and that result becomes a topic of discussion. But that way, the vetting that I'm looking for, the curation that I'm looking for happens, and that takes away some of my concerns that, Reuven's going to be sitting in his dark little closet saying, ha, 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 AI has just taught me this. I'm going to go unleash it on the world. And there's been no other community level feedback. So a two-pronged approach, one within communities as an information resource. And then second, as quite honestly, another, corporations are legally protected as an entity. I view the AI in this context as a separate entity, another member of the team who's contributing.
Fascinating, because I always think if the AI guy's in the room, and it's great that you guys are experimenting with that. I've only talked about it in a theoretical framework. Who is the AI guy? What's his politics or her politics or her gender even, right?
Yeah, which is where you can create all those GPTs, and it does get a little more tricky to Jack's people sitting around a tree. Yeah, if you do I don't know, Claude versus Copilot versus ChatGPT, and it's listening in real time, you really do get different responses, right? Somewhat similar, but they really are different. And yes, they have a different tone. Sometimes a bit more formal, a bit more informal, a bit. You can tell it's gone out to more research, more sources, and then others that's no, it just read one. I can tell it just read from one person, and
it's right.
and that's where we are now. That's one of the slightly more recent things where you can take big ChatGPT and then you can create your own local GPT that in theory only looks at these 1,000 resources instead of these 1 trillion. So it is intentionally biased towards a certain point of view. That's another thing, that's being experimented with.
Oh, that's definitely what's being more than experimented with. That's what's being deployed by the big consultancies. So Accenture, PwC, EY have all invested over $1 billion in that version, the one that is their own, looking at their own stuff. But even that character, bringing them into a room, into a conversation, is intriguing, John, because it will have its biases based on what it read, right? Would you accept?
Yep, absolutely.
It's you could have a manager saying, I don't want our AI, I want some other guy's AI, because I know what this guy's opinions are.
Yep.
So what they're doing is they're a consultancy, so they're not tech guys, right? So what's happening is they're buying the tech in a vanilla flavor, if you like. But an easy way to look at it is to imagine if you had Google just inside your company, okay? And so what happens when you use Google? Nobody, the great win with Google was, no training offered, no training required. I mean, the best interface in the human history, in my opinion, of digital tech so far, right? My mother uses it. She's in her 90s and no one showed her how to do it. So imagine if you had Google inside the company, right? And so it's only going to be spidering the data sources that are germane to the company, that are owned by the company, that are private to the company, videos, reports, files, etc. But instead of you having to then do taxonomy and metadata and all that stuff, it can just find it based on the page ranking. What most people find valuable, it pushes that to the top. So that never happened for interesting reasons. Google obviously held off that because it would start to dilute its business. But now Google doesn't own AI exclusively. It's open. So there's a number of companies that are saying, right, this is our chance to get that nirvana that we wanted. So that tech companies are selling AI as a vanilla flavor and then working with their clients to target that AI to consume internal content. Okay. And so what they're finding is when it's reading internal content at the moment, it's not always summarizing in the best way because it's not educated enough on the technical side. So if the one I'm working with, the client works in the area of tax. Okay. So all the tax documentation has subtle nuances and different legislation in different parts of the world. And so it has to be educated. So that's where they've got a KM team of tax specialists working with the AI to keep improving it, but it's getting better and it's doing it faster and faster. So that's the idea. The guy from Accenture said the most of the money is going towards people being trained how to do it, not the tech. We bought the tech already. It's people being trained how to use this thing properly so we get the accuracy.
Hasn't there been a popular quote that says something like, we're not going to be replaced by AI, we're going to be replaced by people that know how to use AI, something like that?
Yes, it's one of my favorite mantras that's going around, and I quote it a lot. AI is not going to take your job, but the guy who knows how to use AI, she is going to take your job. Right? So absolutely. And I think, this might be a nice way, and I think our time is up now for today, but it would be a good way to segue into Gen Z next, because that's probably where the highest skill base sits, but let's not assume that until we discuss it. So we're lucky. We're working in an exciting area. That's, not everyone can say that.
Well, one of the things I enjoyed about this conversation, quite honestly, and I hope you all understand the context of this, the kind of topics we're talking about is hard to find with our experiences, peers to talk to, who understand where we're from, because we've all got similar backgrounds, similar experiences. We certainly have the teaching background, so we understand the theoretical versus the practical side of it. One of the things that I talk to my students about is this feeling of aloneness, that when they get back to their jobs, who do they turn to bounce ideas off of? So I truly treasure these kinds of conversations, because I'll sit here and have these wild ideas and think I'm the most brilliant person on earth. And then John and Reuven bring me crashing back down to reality, which is great. I mean, these are the kinds of dialogues we need to have within KM that I think by and large are missing today.
I think that's a great point, Jack. I agree with you. I think they're missing. But it's interesting. As you were speaking, I was thinking, why do you and I, the three of us, we're like musicians. Why do we have so much fun together and just jam? And I realized another quality, which will definitely appeal to John, trust. We three have got immense, we've been doing this together for years. So we've got trust in each other. We're comfortable with wherever it goes. And we're not bothered if we disagree or agree. We're interested more to explore together, which is like what great musicians will do together, particularly jazz musicians. And I think trust is another thing that, just to close out the conversation, that AI won't be able to deliver, but that needs to be handled by the knowledge management team or some humans in the company, creating and preserving that trust. I agree with you, Jack. I feel for most employees. My kids are of an age where they're working in companies now, and there isn't that deep trust yet, and often you'll be moved to a different department anyway before you can build that trust. So I think trust is a magical ingredient of humans. That would be my take to close out.
say one last thing about that too, Reuben, and I think this would be a great segue into a new topic for us to discuss, is about the enormous turnover we have in personnel in organizations and how it's difficult to build trust when there's so much personnel turbulence, people coming in and out of the organization all the time, all the retirements we're facing, working from home, quiet quitting, all of these have an enormous impact on KM. And to your point, within the community, within the organization, that tribe, if you will, how do you build trust if the members are constantly moving in and out?
Great question for the next one. John?
Yeah, for closing for me, yes. I feel the trust, and that's what I want to bring in is emotions and bodily sensations, right? That's going to be part of the human contribution to all of this. And I feel it with this whole group, both of you. I felt it in this conversation. I've noticed my body has been leaning forward, like I'm leaning forward in my chair. I'm physically leaning into the conversation. I'd love that conversation. What is it that has happened between the three of us? Or what is it that we're imagining is between us, right? What is that trust? What is that empathy? What is that care? I know I've been through some stuff with both of you, and we've had some difficult, challenging conversations. And now we're to a point where we can joke and banter with each other, but we know it comes with some history, and we could go through it again if we needed to. And, like I almost want to use the word foundation. There's something that we can lean on that has me feeling safe and courageous to speak my truth and be similar, be different, be like in the conversation best I know how. And this is probably important too. Different words for me are, I'm open to being changed by both of you, and I'm open to being changed by us as a group. And if I'm really honest and candid, I'm not sure I'm always that open in every conversation I'm a part of. So, yeah.
That's a wonderful compliment. Thank you.
And I also enjoyed, except the part where I had to agree with both John and Reuben.
I know. What was that?
Mustn't do that again.
My day is ruined now.
Yep.
Okay, Brandon, I think that's a nice wrap
for
you. Thank you so much.